Welcome back to the Football League Papers podcast. My name is Matt Badcock. I'm joined by our editor, John Lyons, and our chief writer, Chris Dunlavy. Chaps, welcome back. We had a week off, half-term. Chaos prevented us from recording last week, but plenty been happening in the meantime. Plenty happening already this week, and we'll probably have to start in the Championship with Southampton, and Will Still no more. He's been relieved of his duties after a fairly tricky start, but young English manager getting his first opportunity in English football, and it's not gone as he'd hoped, or I'm sure the club had hoped, Chris.
No, you got to feel sorry for him, really. 13 league games, it's not a lot to stamp your mark and turn things around. It sort of went south from very, very quickly in the end. It felt like he was having a relatively bad time, and then all of a sudden it's all, everything dipped fairly dramatically, and 3 defeats in a row and he's gone. But yeah, it's a tricky one to analyse. I've watched Southampton a few times. I've seen them live once. I've watched them on TV a few times as well. It was quite difficult to sort of pinpoint any one specific thing that was wrong, and I think maybe that was part of the problem, was that Still himself was struggling to kind of work it out. But they couldn't seem to sustain 90-minute performances was one. They would have spells, but they didn't dominate any of the games they were in. I think a lot goes back to the summer as well. They're just a bit toothless, and they didn't. I think the biggest problem they had is they didn't buy a striker in the summer. They did. They bought Damien Downs for 6.8 million, but he's a young guy, never played in England, was very much a sort of punt on potential. You can't buy someone like that and put all your eggs in that basket. They obviously had Ross Stewart coming back from injury, who did well when he played, but then got injured again. Again, you can't realistically rely on someone who's been out for 2 years. And they've got Adam Armstrong, knows where the goal is, proven scorer, but isn't a lone striker. So they've been playing him on the left. And I just think it was, given that they had parachute money, given that they were in a position of strength, they needed to go out and buy a £10 million striker, a £15 million striker, someone who would guarantee them 15 or 20 goals at this level. And you can see, it's there this in the XG, that they've got the third best XG in the league, and which means they've been creating chances, but they haven't been putting them away. And even, numbers can be misleading, but you just watch them. Like, you watch the game I watched, they missed a penalty and they missed a 1-on-1. And then if you look at the weekend's game, Still's last game, Adam Armstrong goes clean through, keeper saves it, misses a chip, somebody else misses from 6 yards. It's like the whole season really has been a litany of mistakes at kind of both ends. Again, I think back to the game I watched, Sheffield United. Sheffield United's goal came from a defender passing it straight to one of their players, then getting skinned. What can Still do about those sorts of things? It's not him. And I don't think, honestly, if you ask the supporters, they wouldn't really say he was particularly to blame either. I think it's just a combination of a bit of a hangover from last year and poor recruitment. And that failure to buy a striker, I think, has just killed him.
Yeah, John, a tough one for Still, because you say he's kind of been talked about for a little while, hasn't he? And, he kind of had all this sort of hype around him, and obviously coming over from Lyons, and, now getting that opportunity, and then for it to go like this, a tough one for him on a sort of a personal level, because that was everyone knows the sort of the potential of Southampton and what the club can kind of be.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a good opportunity there for him, and you would have fancied with the players that even with the fact they haven't got the striker they needed, you would have still fancied them to be up there or thereabouts in the table. So it's a shame the way it's sort of turned out for him, and you sort of wonder. Is he going to go back to France or another country before he maybe comes back here and has another shot at it? But yeah, I mean, looking at some of the highlights of some of the games, some of the chances that they've missed have been incredible. They've missed so many, sitters really. So it's funny when things start going wrong and confidence starts draining out of a team. everything seems more difficult. Maybe people are sort of trying a bit too hard when they're not sort of going on their instinct. I think probably maybe the same things kind of happened with Norwich as well. Their results have sort of fallen off a cliff, and I think the confidence has drained right out of them, probably especially at Carrow Road. So, I mean, just going back to Southampton, they've obviously decided they needed to make that change now to give them a chance of sort of turning their season around. So we need to see now who they're gonna bring in. Obviously, there's a bit of talk. It's quite fashionable these days for teams to bring back an old manager. So obviously Russell Martin's been linked with it. Michael Carrick's maybe an interesting shout as well for that one. So we need to see what happens there.
Yeah, but it'll be a job that people want. Chris, can you like people will say don't go back, but can you see the sort of advantage of going again for Russell Martin?
Not really, no. I think it would be, I think the Southampton fans were fairly strongly turned against his methods, his way of playing by the time he left. And I think in those circumstances, he'd have to get it right pretty quickly to sort of win them back round. I don't think, he left. He wasn't unpopular when he left, but I think that they'd kind of had enough of his style of football. And I just think at this point, when you need to galvanise the fans, galvanise the players, I'm not sure someone like that is who you need personally. I think it might be a bad idea.
I was sat at a lunch earlier in the summer with a Rangers fan on the table, and he was that was quite a couple of months ago. Not happy right from the beginning with how it was going up there. But yeah, again, an interesting one for where he comes back next. If it's not Southampton, where he comes back. Can you see sort of more in someone like Carrick then possibly?
Yeah, I just think he comes with no baggage. That's the thing. You'll get a clean slate. You'll get a bit of time. But I wrote about this last week, that the problem you've got now, and it's the same for all relegated clubs, is for the last sort of 7-8 years or so, when the parachute payment structure changed to become really front weighted, it essentially gives you 2 years to get out of the Championship. You've got 2 years. By the time the third parachute payment comes round, it's dropped off. The amount of money is dropped off a cliff, and by then you are really having to sort of look at restructuring your club and getting rid of all the high earners and kind of accepting life as a Championship club at that point. So there's this desperation now in those first 2 years to get back up, and it makes it just a kind of dangerous job for anyone to take. You're going to get time, but owners just panic at the first sign of things going wrong because they know they've got that 2-year window. I think Still's a victim of that, and it'll be whoever comes in is going to be expected to shoot them up the table. So I'd say it's a great job in the sense that you've got a strong squad. It's a difficult job in terms of the expectations.
Yeah, definitely. And John talking about, if you say that they've been missing sitters, then we all should listen, because you saw one of the greatest misses of all time in the whole of English football, didn't you? And when you're back in your non-league days was it at Harrow and Rocky Baptiste missed that unbelievable?
Yeah, Rocky Baptiste, Harrow Borough. I think maybe it was against Waltham Abbey. I can't, not sure on that, but clean through.
Look at it on YouTube.
Clean through. Yeah, clean through last minute of the game. I think the game was already in the bag, maybe 5-3 up at that stage, and he's literally threw about a yard from goal. And I think he's just for fun. He's tried to absolutely smash it in and whacked it across the goal, and it's gone off. Obviously, it's gone off the pitch, and the commentator there couldn't believe it. And obviously, it went viral. It got a ton of views. Incredible miss. And obviously, Rocky was a top player in his day, and obviously that happened at Waterloo Goal FA Cup run when they got through to play Liverpool and all that sort of stuff as well. But I think he can probably see the funny side of it.
I think he did. He scored for Farmer Town against Arsenal as well in the FA Cup, so he did score a few goals. But that was an unbelievable one. So yeah, interesting times at Southampton, and possibly at the start of the season, if we said after 13 games that you'd have Southampton, Sheffield United, Norwich sort of 21st, 22nd, 23rd. I'm not sure you would have predicted that. To say the least.
As well, Leicester 14th as well. I don't think anybody would have thought that would happen.
Would you have had Coventry sitting top and have only just tasted their first defeat after 13 games. They've been on an unbelievable start under Frank Lampard.
Yeah, well,
probably not.
Go on, John.
No, I was going to say, well, probably not. I mean, not to that extent. I mean, I think we knew they had a pretty good squad, and obviously they've got goal scorers, but I don't think we could have expected them to sort of playing the way they have been and scoring so many goals. I mean, their goal difference is incredible compared to the rest of the division. And I suppose the thing now is we need to see if how they react to that setback last Friday at Wrexham. Frank Lampard keeps saying he's obviously trying to play the hype down because people are maybe getting a bit carried away. But it'd be interesting the next 2 or 3 weeks, see if they can sort of get back on the goal trail, get the wins. I noticed they've got a big game on Saturday at Stoke as well, so that's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, it'll be Mark Robins against his old club as well, so that'll be one to look forward to.
Yeah, Chris, the last unbeaten record in the EFL has finally toppled in Cov.
Yeah, that's it. Well, like John says, that'll be the test of the moment. It's easy when the goals are flying in and everyone's sort of playing with a smile on their face. So we'll see how they bounce back. But I mean, they have got a lot of firepower. I think the big thing, I've said it from the start, I think the big thing for Coventry, I don't think it shouldn't affect them too much. They've got a lot of firepower, but I think it'll be injuries. If they can stay clear of injuries, I think they'll be okay. I just think when you sort of beyond the first sort of 12 or 13 players, there's not huge depth. But I think there's all things being equal, I think they probably are the best attacking unit in the league.
Yeah, good result for Wrexham though, and Kiefer Moore scoring a perfect hat trick in that win. I think Josh Windass maybe set up all three as well. It shows the quality they've got there, and maybe starting to sort of find their feet a bit more now, John, in the Championship.
Yeah, and I think Phil Parkinson was quite keen to make the point that it was a statement win for them. So that was probably the result maybe they were looking for, to maybe really kickstart them and give them that bit of belief that some of those players maybe that they do belong at that level and can be an effective team at that level. And obviously if you've got Kiefer Moore sort of banging in goals on a regular basis, and obviously he's up near the top of the Championship scoring charts now, that'll make a huge difference. Obviously we know how good he is in the air, and it was no surprise that obviously one of his goals came with his head the other night, but obviously he got left foot, right foot as well, perfect hat trick, and he's looking in probably the best form he's been in for years, if not ever. So if they can keep him firing, and obviously if Windass can supply some service, and his teammates, then there's no reason why they can't have, they couldn't go on a bit of a run and steam up the table.
I think that is the thing with Moore, isn't it? It's kind of the service, because he is capable. I think one of the problems you've got as a big man is you're often just used to bounce the ball off. So you're often just stuck up there and used to bring other people into play and that sort of thing. Whereas if you do actually use Moore and get the ball into the box and give him chances, then I think he's kind of proved in the past that if he's in those sorts of teams who get the ball in, then he's fairly reliable. He will score goals reliably. If you think back to sort of Cardiff under Warnock and Rotherham under Paul Warne, those were great seasons he had. And I think if you do put the ball in for him and don't just use him as a hold-up man, then he will score.
Yeah, he's a great example, isn't he, to young players who. It wasn't all that long ago that Kiefer Moore was in non-league, but also on loan in non-league from a non-league side. He was at Forest Green, and they'd loaned him out to Torquay United, and he was sort of scoring goals there. It just shows, different journeys to the top. And he's another one who's kind of come out of non-league and done really well. And obviously gone on and played at major tournaments as well with Wales and stuff, which is incredible, really incredible to see. Maybe Chris brings on. We talked about Stoke there, and Chris, you were going to talk about Diven Mbama, who is on loan to Stoke from Man City and flying there.
Yeah, well, he scored a hat trick at the weekend, and he sort of broke it. He hadn't scored for 10 games before that, but he's played really well regardless. And Mark Robins has consistently highlighted that how good he's been in his general play. But yeah, he's just an interesting player. Diven Mbama, because I think we all remember he came through at West Ham as a sort of 17, 18-year-old, sort of tipped to be brilliant. Got into the sort of first team squad very early. And I remember those sort of the fans were really clamouring to have him in the first team because he was a homegrown sort of guy, and they wanted to see him. David Moyes never really, thought he was too young, wouldn't play him. Eventually he left because he was frustrated. And I think a lot of people were sort of surprised because he then joined, last summer he joined Man City, and you're not going to get very many minutes there. But he's just an interesting example of a sort of what goes on at the top end of the game, because Man City signed him with no real intention of him being a first team player. So what you tend to find with Premier League clubs is they have under 21 squads and elite development squads that play in Premier League 2. So they'll often give contracts to 18-year-old players who they don't really see a future for, if they're absolutely honest. They'll just give out because they have to fulfill these fixtures. They have to have teams of players, and they need to, for the one or two good players they've got, they need to play in a team. So you'll often, it sounds harsh, but it's the kind of brutal reality of the game at that level, is you'll often have these players who are just there to fill spaces, who will never make the first team. And Mubama's a sort of even more extreme example, in that Man City basically signed him because they didn't have any strikers to play in their elite development squad. So they signed him specifically to play in Premier League 2 with no real intention of him playing in the first. And he did really well. He absolutely fulfilled that. I think he scored something like 14 goals in 10 games or something last season in Premier League 2. But presumably now, they've sent him on loan. They've paid West Ham £2 million in compensation, and I think the idea is now presumably to try and put him in the shop window in the Championship and drum up a bit of interest. But it's clear. I mean, the guy is a good player. You can see. I think earlier in his career, he's got. I think if there was a criticism of him, was that he was almost too selfless. So he was, he'd run channels and he'd hold the ball up and he'd bring other people into play and he'd work hard, but he didn't necessarily get into the sort of areas to score enough goals. But if you look at him on Saturday, those goals, the first one sort of, he dives in between two centre halves, 6-yard tap in. Second one, keeper lets one spill, jumps on it, scores a tap in. Third one, runs on the through ball, right between the posts, scores a goal. They're all strikers' goals. So I think, if you add that to the all-round game and he develops that, I mean, he's absolutely not going to struggle to get a Championship club at all.
Yeah, John, maybe we'll sort of step around that top end and quickly mention Middlesbrough and Rob Edwards obviously being linked to the Wolves job, but he's kind of come out and said, my full focus is here, and good news for Borough fans from that point of view.
Yeah, we've had one or two of those kind of sort of statements recently, because obviously there was the one towards the back end of last week with Kieran McKenna getting the Ipswich manager getting linked with the Celtic job, and he's pretty much come out and sort of said the same thing. So if you're at a club, and you're the manager, then people need to believe in you and that you're going to be there and are committed to the club. So it kind of makes sense for those managers to come out and say those things. But Middlesbrough obviously have made people probably thought at the start when they first appointed Rob Edwards that it was a good appointment, and he's made an excellent start. Kind of reminds me a little bit when he started off at Forest Green, because I remember sort of talking to him once or twice around those days, and he sort of came in from sort of nowhere really and back into the Football League. Obviously, they had a good sort of playing career and stuff like that. So decent sort of pedigree from that point of view, but then he came in there and he put a really good team together at Forest Green in League Two, and they played the wing back system as well, and they had obviously good strikers in Jamil Matt and Matty Stevens. So that was a really effective kind of team. Obviously he's done well at Luton. Obviously Watford was a bit of a struggle, and he obviously wouldn't have enjoyed his return there much at the weekend. But obviously he's gone into Middlesbrough, and overall he's made a great start, and it's reminds me a little bit of when he went into Forest Green. So and obviously Forest Green went on to, I think they won the league that season. So if he can keep Middlesbrough up there doing well, then I think everyone will be happy. And I think from his point of view as well, Middlesbrough's a good club, got ambition obviously to get into the Premier League. So at the moment, Wolves certainly isn't. It certainly isn't an easy job.
Yeah, definitely not. Talking of new jobs, not easy jobs, and expectation, we would drop down into League One now and look at Luke Williams. Chris coming back into the game at Peterborough. Obviously had a pretty tough start to League One when all the expectations are always for them to be much higher. But an opportunity for Luke to go in and make his mark as he has done particularly at Notts County.
Yeah, well, Peterborough, another one where it's really hard to work out what's kind of gone wrong there, because you look at the team and maybe it's not got the sort of stars of years gone by, and they lost Malik Mothersill, didn't they? So, but it's still not bad enough to be bottom of League One, really. You wouldn't have said, and so I think he's got a lot to work with. He's a good manager. He's proved it before. I think he'll be very determined to prove that, when he went in at Swansea, the club was a mess, really. There was sort of various factions in the boardroom, and some of them wanted him, some of them didn't. There was the sort of farcical situation where they hired the director of football from Notts County, his previous club, and then literally sacked Williams about 24 hours later. So it was just this, there was just this weird sort of disjointed thinking at the time. And I think he never, if he's honest, he never got the support he needed. He never got the players he needed. And he was always sort of fighting an uphill battle. Whereas when you think back to Notts County, the whole club was behind him. He had great relationships with everyone. And I think, he's proved there. He had good spells at Swansea, but he proved there that if you back him, he's a good manager. And the reality for it is he can't do much worse. They're bottom of the league. Like, you can only go up from here. And I sort of, it might be a slow progress because confidence is rock bottom there, but I would back him to do well.
Yeah, John, is Notts side obviously so well known for their sort of passing, style and how he liked to approach the game. That they're only 5 points off Burton and Reading, who are just sitting outside the relegation zone. Is it, when a manager comes in, is it early enough in the season to kind of go with that footballing philosophy, that sort of style, or is it? Do you think he'll be thinking, I just need to get some points on the board first of all? Well, it's hard to embed that in straight away, but.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to have a look at the squad, and see the makeup of the squad and probably what it's suited to. You would have thought Darren Ferguson, the style that he played was, pretty attacking sort of style of football and, decent style of football as well. So from that point of view, you'd think the transition to Luke Williams wouldn't necessarily be that difficult. So, it's not as though Luke's going into a long ball team and suddenly going to have to sort of making sweeping changes. So it might be a case of more sort of tweaking things, evolving things a little bit, to try and sort of get the best out of those players that he's got. And I think sort of Chris sort of touched on it there. Obviously, they lost Malik Mothersill over the summer. They lost Kwame Poku. They lost Ricky J. Jones. So they've lost a lot of goals there. So it's always difficult when you're losing your best players. It's not always easy to replace them with players of that caliber or necessarily players that are going to come in sort of straight away and do the business. So Luke's, I mean, probably from his point of view, we're in early November now. So the good thing is he's got November, he's got December. He can have a look at the squad in that time. He can see where they're short, and then obviously he can do a bit of business in January. And I'm sure Darren McAntony will want to back him over in January if they do need to bring a striker or two, or wherever he thinks that they're light. So Luke's got a couple of months now. He can have a good look at that squad and see what he needs to do.
Yeah, Chris, talking of new managers, Liam Richardson going in at Reading, and it's one of those typical your first game against National League Carlisle in the FA Cup, being 2-0 up and going into stoppage time, and then suddenly the game was in extra time 2-2, and then you've lost it 3-2 in extra time. And is that kind of one of those, it's that cliche of like, I learned a lot today. That was some good lessons. I learned a lot about the team and the character and the makeup that we've got in there, and we will be better for this in the long run. But surely you must be thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I probably imagine what he probably learned was that the confidence is shot, and you concede 3 goals in what was effectively about 10 minutes, and like to National League opposition. Yeah, I mean, I guess it exposed the scale of the task. But I think I said it on an earlier podcast, though. I mean, Reading have got a young squad who've had a tough few years with various issues, and I think it was, they are still relatively inexperienced, but I think, what they've got in Liam is somebody who went into that, into a far, far worse situation at Wigan when he took charge there, when they'd just come out of administration. In fact, I think they were still in administration at the time, and they were basically relying completely on sort of kids and free transfers, anybody that could get to play for them, really. And he kept them up, and then he won the league the next year, which was an incredible achievement when you looked at the makeup of the squad. And that was all due to just, that was pure coaching, really. That was developing young players and a system that worked for them. So it feels like a smart appointment in that sense. It feels like they've tried to profile someone who can work with their squad. Obviously, from Wigan, he went and he had that bizarre sacking, didn't he, where he signed a new contract at Wigan and then got sacked about 6 weeks later. And then he went to Rotherham, and he only won, I think it was twice in 24 games at Rotherham. It was a completely disaster, got relegated from the Championship. But again, a bit like I was saying with Luke Williams at Swansea, that really can't be pinned on him. That all resulted from a sort of really bad summer in the transfer market that preceded him, and left him with it was a squad that just wasn't cut out for the Championship. So I think they could have had Pep Guardiola in charge that year and gone down. So I think he will want to prove a point in that sense, but I think when you look at the profile of Reading's squad, I think it's a very sensible appointment.
Yeah, and John, you say a club that we all know what the potential is, but it's about realising that they are coming off a really difficult few years, and probably that sort of bit of patience is going to be key for them.
Yeah, because obviously Rob Couhig come in as the new owner now. Obviously, he was formerly at Wycombe, and I think it's been a tough few years probably for everyone connected with the club, players, fans, managers, whoever's been there, and sort of battling sort of thing. So, you possibly, when you do get that new owner, you perhaps sort of start to think things are going to sort of turn around quite quickly, whereas it might not necessarily be the case, and you've got to maybe need a few windows to strengthen the squad and bring some better quality players in to add to some of the good youngsters who are there. So it might take that that bit of extra time to do it. I mean, just on that game, Reading Carlisle, I don't know if either of you saw that interview with Regan Linney afterwards, the Carlisle striker who got the hat trick on the BBC. That was a classic interview, and I think we've all been there. We think we've all crumbled at times, but that was a classic. He said the ball was still in the car as well. It was quite funny as well.
Yeah, his match ball was still in the car, which actually, to be honest, doesn't surprise me the way some footballers are. But yeah, he said, "Oh, it's a great 3 points, didn't he, or something like that." So,
asked him about what did the manager say at half time as well, and he said, "Oh, sorry, I wasn't in the changing room at half time." So it was kind of one thing. It was kind of one thing after another, but it certainly goes down as a classic FA Cup interview. That one.
That'll be in you. You have to shoehorn that into your quotes of the year, John, even though he's a non-league player. But yeah, he was on the bench surprisingly in many ways. He's been firing for loads for Carlisle this season, having moved across from Alton in the summer. But great story again. Another, I know I always bang on about the non-league boys, but another one who's come through that.
Yeah. Well, took those goals.
FC United, and he's really sort of lighting up in non-league now.
Yeah, I mean, took Regan Lane, obviously, the way he took those goals. I mean, they're brilliant goals, brilliant finishes, scoring lots of goals for Carlisle this season. So you imagine there might be a few Football League clubs keeping an eye on him. So he'll be one we'll sort of have to keep tabs on. And you can keep us posted on that, Badders, with your role with the NLP.
He had that weird quirk as well, wasn't it, where he had the goal, the equaliser was in the 90+8, so the 98th minute, and then he scored the third goal in the 94th minute because it had gone into extra time, and it sort of looks weird on the scoreline boxes.
That's why I couldn't work out how many goals it was and how many minutes because it all looked mental.
It was. I mean, it's one of those weird ones. We were obviously in the thick of it on Saturday, and I'd kind of it gets to that sort of point at 5 o'clock where you're starting to things are starting to, people are coming into the office to do sub and, just kind of generally getting ready. And I kind of just written that off. I thought that Reading had won, and it wasn't until a little way, just as extra time had started, I realised it had gone into extra time, and then they sort of scored straight away. It was, bonkers. It was. So let's maybe stick in the FA Cup, and there was a couple of surprises in there for over Monday and Sunday. The Football League clubs came through some tricky ties unscathed. Accrington needed extra time against Gainsborough Trinity to get through that, but Leyton Orient beat Tamworth last night, and Walsall got past Eastleigh, and Shrewsbury past South Shields. And despite going a goal down, Port Vale to Malden and Tiptree, they kind of scored a similar speed of goals. As Regan Linden, I think they scored about 3 or 4 in a sort of space of a very short time to sort of flip that game totally on its head and make sure there was no excitement there. But did sort of see League One AFC Wimbledon go out to Gateshead on Saturday. See Boreham Wood beat Crawley. A tricky. They're always tricky, those, John, aren't they? Those FA Cup games when you're against those non-league sides, and we've probably seen the gap closing between non-league and the EFO in recent years, and only goes to illustrate it again on Saturday. Yeah,
because it's probably sort of going back 30 years or 40 years, FA Cup first round day, you quite often see a load of hammerings, because you'd have your professional teams taking on sort of part-time teams, and maybe sort of would run out of steam in the second half or whatever. But obviously, you know this well from your work on the NLP banners. There's obviously more full-time teams in non-league now. It's incredible the amount of full-time teams, not just obviously in the National League, but obviously National League North, National League South. You've got some full-time teams, and even lower down the ladder than that as well. So you can be fit, you can be organised, and you can be very hard to break down. So that gap, you don't see too many hammerings now, do we? Port Vale obviously put on a bit of a goal spurt there against Malden and Tiptree after letting in that early goal. But yeah, not too many hammerings, and obviously there is that situation now where obviously teams know if they can sort of dig in and battle 90 minutes. Obviously they've got the extra time, which is tough, but there is potentially a penalty shootout on that day if you can hang in there that long. So there is all to play for in that regard. And so there were some great ties. There were some great goals at the weekend. I mean, Michael Mellon at Oldham with his hat trick against Northampton. Brilliant overhead kick for one of those goals. So there was some great games in the FA Cup, some great excitement. So 40 ties, bags of games, bags of goals, lots of drama. Obviously Cheltenham did well to beat Bradford. Bit of controversy with that goal about the whistle and what was happening there. I think was it Chesterfield who won at Stevenage, so there was a couple of shocks there with teams in League Two beating teams right up the top of League One, perhaps showing that the difference between League Two and League One isn't that big necessarily either.
It's interesting that me and you have talked about this before, about sort of the way that just having the access to data and scouting and all that sort of stuff has just really sort of leveled the playing field a bit. Because I remember we've all been watching non-league football off and on for 20 years more, and I think with the greater respect, you go back 20, 25 years and the tactics at that level were fairly rudimentary. And now, I remember watching Horsham against Barnsley. Maybe it was in the FA Cup 2 or 3 years ago, and Horsham step three at the time, I think, maybe even step 4. But step 3, and then Barnsley were League One, and you could see, you sit down in your seat and you watch the game and you see them line up and you watch how they press and move, and you could see instantly what Horsham were doing. You could see the shape, you could see what they were doing off the ball, you could see them on the ball, you could see where they were pressing and how they were pressing, and it was just something you just did not see years and years ago. They'd studied Barnsley, they knew where they were vulnerable, and they were trying to exploit it. And it was like, that's the difference, I think, now.
Yeah, I think non-league managers and players are just so tactically aware. because a lot of them, obviously, a lot of players have come through different academy systems and dropped down, but there is so much more. You go right down in non-league and you will see. They can't always do it, but they still try. You'll see centre halves being split, centre midfield. It is a totally different game. The old boy sitting in the centre circle and spraying the ball around, because he used to be decent back in the day, but now he's got two knee braces holding his legs together, and he could just pass it around, and then the big lad at the back who just smashes everything in the air. That doesn't really exist anymore. They kind of, everyone's, as you say, so much fitter. They're able to kind of stay in that shape much longer, kind of switch. Obviously the players higher up are better, so you should eventually be able to kind of break them down or get that chance and then take it. But they are so much more switched on, and particularly that National League as well. That's just like, there's no difference at all really, and that's a tricky one. But it's interesting about the extra time though. Do you think we talk? There's been so much debate about replays and whether that's good for the game. It's particularly in the finances that can come from it, particularly in those sort of later rounds in when the Premier League sides are in there. I've been to first round replays back at a football league club with a non-league side, and there's not many people in the ground. You sort of think, did we really need this on this night? But I know later in the competition there will be a chance where a League Two side maybe gets a draw with a Man United or a Liverpool possibly, and then they don't get that opportunity to go back. But you look at Carlisle on Saturday, and probably they would have wanted extra time because they've got those 2 goals. If Reading had would have got away with it and then been able to regroup, I know they probably wouldn't have fancied going up to Carlisle, but that kind of can possibly come into it. Same with Brackley and getting past Notts County. There's 2 sides to the coin, John, I guess, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were kind of mentioning this a little bit in the office on Saturday as well. I mean, it is a bit frustrating that there aren't replays at least in the first and second rounds, because the reason why they obviously don't want to do it after that is because the big clubs have got fixture congestion with the European game, and those kind of games just seem to sort of increase every other year. So fair enough, they're not going to have them in from third round onwards, but first and second round, that first round now is all done and dusted, isn't it? We got no replays to look forward to. It was great to have that weekend, and you got those replays to look forward to. Even from the paper's point of view as well, you got replays to preview and stuff like that. There's big games. There's more televised games because 1 or 2 of those replays will be on the telly as well. The clubs are getting broadcast fees. Some of those non-league clubs, be loving a game against a football league team at home to get a big crowd in, or even obviously potentially loving a away replay at a football league club as well. So yeah, it is a real shame. It is a real shame. We have talked about this as well, that sometimes there are quite a few sort of midweek programs that aren't being used, or potentially are used for sort of lower sort of competitions. Whereas it'd be great if you could stick some FA Cup replays in some of those midweeks, especially if we were in the office on Saturdays. We can get out to a game. Get out to a game midweek.
Yeah, but it's a good point.
An FA Cup replay, first, second round. It can be a great occasion, can be great atmosphere. So yeah, I'm a bit frustrated. That's gone now.
Yeah, I would much rather see replay. Like, I'm not a big fan, I've never been a big fan of extra time. I find extra time tends to be awful. Sort of 99% of the time, you get the odd good one, but it's generally just a prelude to penalties where everybody sort of semi-downs tools. But yeah, replays, I don't think there's really, I don't understand why they've been scrapped at that level. Because like you say, I mean, it's just, it's not like it favours the league club either. I mean, they need all the money they can get. Anything extra for both, for non-league sides, lower league clubs, they need the money. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that you would scrap them at that level. But yeah, extra time I can happily do without.
I always go back. I think I remember the quote right, but from Josh Coulson when he was at Cambridge United, and Cambridge were in League Two, and they had Manchester United, Louis van Gaal's Man United I think it was on a Friday night, and Josh missed a good header in the box late on, put it over the bar. When you think another day that could have flown in the back of the net, and I think he actually said, "That was one of the best misses I've ever of my career because I got to go and play at Old Trafford instead." And obviously, he would have been the hero on the night and gone through, but he did get the opportunity to go and play at Old Trafford in the replay. And I can't remember if Cambridge led in that as well. But it's those sort of opportunities and that sort of money that they earned from that was.
Chairman was cheering that miss, wasn't he?
It's funny. Do you want the glory now, or do you want to go and get the payday? It's kind of the. To be fair, Josh Coulson has got a bar named after him at the Abbey Stadium, so he's kind of hasn't hurt his legacy there or anything. That's for sure. He's always
that money might have paid for it by the sounds of it.
Could have been a longer bar, but
I've got a feeling I was at the Old Trafford game. I've got a feeling I went to that. I think.
Did they lead or something? They hit the post early on, Cambridge or something.
They had a brilliant chance really, really early on. I think somebody maybe hit the crossbar or the post with a header or something. Yeah. It's a very vague memory, but I've got a feeling like I can't remember who was in the team. I think it was when Di Maria was there. I think he played.
Yeah, I went to the first game at Cambridge, and Di Maria played. Falcao. I think Carrot was playing. Phil Jones, I remember, was playing. I think Valdez was in goal. Victor Valdez was in goal for Man United. I can't remember who else they had. Very decent side. And then I remember they coming in and Louis van Gaal sort of moaning about the state of the pitch after the first game. I'm thinking, what's he on about? I just didn't know. Have you ever had it when you're in these presses and the manager's going on me thinking, I do not know what you're talking about. I just don't know where this has come from. He's talking about like some other incident as well. I'm thinking, am I like sort of totally sort of missed this? Have you ever have that when it's
I think it's because sometimes they've got to, if they've played badly, they've just got to like find something, haven't they? Anything to do, so they'll just like pick on a random incident that nobody saw.
Yeah. I think as I've got more experience,
it's usually a Stonewall penalty that no one's really noticed at all, isn't it?
Yeah. You sort of, and they sort of start talking about, anyone could have seen that, and you're thinking, I can't remember that. And you start doubting yourself, thinking, did I miss that completely? And you start looking back through your notes, thinking, I can't remember that penalty at all. But it's the art of being a manager is definitely goes beyond the pitch. But we'll have a look. We're sure we'll talk about the second round games in the coming weeks, and obviously lots of football tonight and tomorrow in the Championship, particularly. So lots in the paper. It's a bit early in the week to ask you chaps what you've got going in the FLP this week, but any inklings so far? Have you been bashing out some stories the last couple of days, Chris?
Well, I've written, I'll be doing a column about Leicester and the problems there under Marty Cifuentes, which, to be perfectly honest, I could almost just pretty much everything I said about Southampton is kind of true of Leicester as well. They just have recruited poorly, not bought a striker, etc., etc. But I'll be looking at sort of the situation he finds himself in. Divine Mubama, I'll be profiling him as a player, and I'm hoping to get various bits and bobs. Should be speaking to Luke Williams tomorrow, so I'll be looking forward to that at Peterborough, see what his plans are there, and we'll see what else I get.
I think he's always a really interesting chat, Luke Williams. I enjoyed talking to him quite a bit. I feel like I was on the Zoom call at Notts County every other week in that back end of the season when they were going for the title against Wrexham, but always an engaging character who kind of talks beyond football and has got lots of other sort of life experiences. So we'll look forward to that.
He was working at Bristol Airport, wasn't he?
He was.
After he left Swansea, so it'll be interesting to talk to him about that, I think.
Yeah, he was. There was kind of a piece in the Athletic about it, wasn't there? Kind of not long after, and I think he, sort of stopped after a while, didn't he? Soon after that, because I think people would kind of, where he sort of realised that he was there, he sort of kind of enjoying going around and helping people out and going under the radar a little bit, and but good to see him back in football. Look forward to reading that this weekend. Look forward to seeing what else you chaps come up with as well. So make sure you pick up your Football League paper on Sunday, obviously in the shops, online digital subscriptions available as well. Make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast. Good to be back, chaps. Good to speak again, and we will see how the results go this week and at the weekend, and we'll catch up again next week and try and make sense of it all. Cheers, chaps.
Cheers.